Descending.
Okay, Andrea, you can go ahead and begin.
Welcome to today's telephone town hall with Senator John Walsh. I'm Andrea Helling, Senator Walsh's Deputy Chief of Staff. We're going to be discussing the issues important to you. So if you have a question at any time during the event, please press 0 on the call. Right now, we're dialing out to thousands of people from around Montana to join the conversation. In just a moment, we'll be hearing from Senator Walsh and taking your questions live. If you're just joining us, this is Senator John Walsh's live telephone town hall with folks across Montana. In a moment, we'll hear from Senator Walsh on the work he is doing in the Senate and his travel around Montana. Throughout the call, if you have a question you'd like to ask the Senator, press 0 to get into the queue. Senator Walsh will take as many questions as possible tonight. In just a moment, we're going to start taking your questions live. If you have a question, please press 0 to ask your question of Senator Walsh. And with that, I'll turn it over to Senator Walsh. Good evening, Senator Walsh.
Thanks, Andrea. And thanks to everyone on the phone for taking the time to be on this call. I want to take this opportunity to provide you an update on the issues I've been working on in the United States Senate. We've got folks on the line from around Montana, and I'm going to open it up to some questions in just a moment. So if you'd like to ask a question, press 0 now. The VA and the care our veterans get is something a lot of folks are talking about today. The recent revelations of inexcusably long wait times and secret lists is a failure of our American values and is simply unacceptable. Accountability lies with the President and with Congress, which has an obligation to fully support America's veterans. We learned last week that Montana veterans are waiting an average of 45 days for an appointment. That's inexcusable, and we shouldn't have to wait that long. I'm calling on the creation of a special, independent, and bipartisan commission on care, similar to the 9/11 Commission and the Dole-Shalala Commission that investigated Walter Reed under the Bush administration. The Obama administration is both out of time and excuses for the lack of oversight and widespread abuse that is plaguing the VA and our nation's veterans. They deserve answers and a plan for improving the VA. If you're joining us, this is Senator John Walsh, and I'm holding a live telephone town hall with folks from across Montana. If you'd like to ask a question tonight, please press 0 now. Unfortunately, a lot is broken in Washington right now, and no one wants to show real leadership to address the challenges we face. We must get our debt and deficit under control and finally balance our budget. But that won't happen if Congress keeps taking extended breaks. That's why I introduced the Do Your Job Act, to keep Congress in session until we pass a balanced budget. That's also why I introduced major legislation to save taxpayer dollars and improve our national security by getting rid of our reliance on service contractors overseas. The United States has spent $2 trillion on service contractors over the last 13 years. Those contracts cost American taxpayers much more than if our own men and women in uniform performed those same services. This is one of my proposals to cut our spending in a responsible way. Again, if you're just joining us, this is Senator John Walsh, and I'm holding a live telephone town hall conversation with Montanans. If you'd like to ask a question, press 0 to get into the queue. I've been traveling around Montana and hearing from folks about what's on their minds. Everywhere I go, I hear about the concern about our nation's debt and the need to create jobs, about the need to protect our civil liberties and privacy, and about the importance of using Montana-made solutions to protect our clean air, clean water, and access to our public lands. I know the need to make responsible decisions to cut government spending, create jobs, protect our freedoms, and to hold Washington accountable. I hear from sportsmen about the need to protect Montana's outdoor heritage, access to public land, clean air and water, and our Second Amendment rights. That's why I'm championing Made in Montana solutions like the North Fork Protection Act, the Rocky Mountain Front Heritage Act, and the Forest Jobs and Recreation Act. I hear from parents and teachers about the importance of making sure national education policies work for our rural communities and that our kids can afford to go to college. And I hear concern about the government trampling on our civil liberties. From the bulk data collection to the FBI's gag letters demanding personal information, Montanans are rightly concerned that the government is trampling on our constitutional rights. That's why my very first bill was the Civil Liberties Protection Act, to rein in the government's abusive surveillance practices. But Montanans' concerns about civil liberties also extend to equality. That's why I'm supporting the Paycheck Fairness Act, to ensure that women are paid equally for equal work. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, press 0 now to get into the queue. Tonight, I hope to hear directly from you and get a sense of your priorities. Again, press 0 to get in line to ask a question, and I look forward to our conversation. With that, we'll go to questions. Andrea?
Thank you very much, Senator. If you're just joining us this evening, you're part of Senator John Walsh's live telephone town hall conversation with folks from across Montana. If you'd like to ask a question tonight, please press 0 to get into the queue. But before we get to some questions and answers, we'd like to do a poll. What do you think is the most pressing issue Senator Walsh should be addressing in the Senate? Press 1 if it's unemployment in the economy. Press 2 if it's taking care of our veterans. Press 3 if it's the federal debt. Press 4 if it's protecting civil liberties. Press 5 if these issues are of equal importance. Again, press 1 if it's unemployment in the economy. Press 2 if it's veterans. Press 3 if it's the federal debt. 4 for protecting civil liberties. And 5 if these issues are of equal importance. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating in our poll. Now we'll get to questions from around Montana. Our first question comes from Nancy in Billings. Nancy, you are live on the line with Senator Walsh, and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Well, this isn't as much a question as it is a comment, because I've been happy with the way the senator conducts himself in public on going back against what he's been accused of doing. I don't like the way the ads go when they start getting negative, and I'm hoping that he has something to say about trying to keep his advertising as positive and on point about what he wants to do, more so than, doing stuff against the other candidate. Any comments on that?
Well, thank you, Nancy. I really do appreciate that, and I hear that as I travel around the state, that Montanans are tired of all the outside money coming into the state of Montana from outside groups, outside organizations, and with all the negative campaigning that goes along during these campaigns. So I think there is way, too much money in politics, and that is why I've sponsored 2 constitutional amendments to turn Citizens United over. When I trained men and women to deploy to Iraq and with the National Guard, I don't remember any corporations lining up to fight for our country. It was individuals. And so I'm really disappointed in all the outside money that comes into the state, all the negativity, and we want to do as much as we possibly can to ensure that we have a positive campaign. So thank you for supporting me, and I appreciate your comments.
Thank you very much, Senator, for the answer. As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question tonight on Senator John Walsh's live telephone town hall, press 0 to get into the queue. Our next question comes from Dawn in Billings. Dawn, you are live on the line with the Senator. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you, Dawn. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, my question is, since we have a democracy here, we're supposed to have a choice. And I'm wondering why we don't have a choice when we go see the doctor to either have drugs or natural cures. Why don't we have a choice? Second thing is a choice that Medicare should have a choice in where they buy their drugs so they can reduce the cost of Medicare. And the establishment there in Washington won't let them do it. So I think the drug companies have bought out somebody to stop it. So let's change it.
You know what, Don? I agree with you 100%. One thing that I'm very disappointed about is that the Affordable Care Act that the cost of prescription drug prices and prescription drugs cannot be negotiated. I went and visited a doctor in Missoula just a couple weeks ago, and he brought out 2 vials of medication. And one vial he pays over $2,000 for, and the other one about $250 for. The one that he pays $2,000 for, he's required to use that one on Medicare patients. If he was able to use, and the same drug is in the other vial, just under a different name, if he was able to use that on Medicare patients, he would save, his type of doctors would be able to save hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, just in the state of Montana on prescription drugs. So I'm with you on, that's one way that I think we can improve healthcare in this country and bring down costs, is to allow prescription or doctors to negotiate prescription drug prices. Thank you.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question tonight of Senator John Walsh, press 0 to get into the queue. Our next question this evening comes from Roxana in Kalispell. Roxana, you are live on the line with Senator Walsh. You can go ahead and ask your question. Hold on, Roxana, we're getting you on the line. Hold it. There we go. You are live on the line with the Senator. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Senator, for having this open conversation on the telephone. I would like to know when you're going to take care of all those ads that Daines has out against you, saying that you're not responsible and that you did some illegal things when you were with the National Guard. I think it's horrible the way they can lie and lie and lie, and we just keep having to watch them.
Well, thank you, Roxana, and I appreciate your support. I also believe it's wrong to try to swift boat any veteran service. I'm never going to apologize for standing up for the men and women of the Montana National Guard and make sure that they had the proper equipment to deploy to Iraq and Afghanistan. The issues that Congressman Daines is bringing up about me occurred when I was serving as the Adjutant General of the Montana National Guard. And I still remember I commanded an infantry battalion in Iraq where I like to tell Montanans that I took over 700 of Montana's finest young men and women with me into a combat environment in Iraq. And when we arrived in Iraq, we had what were considered light-skinned armored vehicles. And our active duty counterparts had up-armored vehicles, which had the heavy armor on them so that they would protect them from the improvised explosive devices. And before we were going to move from Kuwait up into Iraq, the Secretary of Defense came in and said, we held a town hall meeting. And one of our young National Guard troops stood up and asked Secretary Rumsfeld why the National Guard soldiers and reserve component soldiers had the thin-skinned armored vehicles, and our active duty counterparts had the up-armored equipment. And the Secretary's answer is that you go to combat with what you have. Well, I lost 4 soldiers while I was over there, and one of my soldiers is in a wheelchair for the rest of his life because he had plywood on the top of his vehicle protecting him. So when I came back and I was serving as the Adjutant General of the state of Montana, it was my responsibility to make sure the men and women that deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan had the best equipment that was available. So I fought on their behalf to make sure that happened. And so I'm never going to apologize for fighting for the men and women of the Montana National Guard. And I believe that that's the type of senator that Montanans want back in Washington, D.C. Somebody who's going to stand up and fight for the citizens of our great state. So I appreciate your comments, and we will, I know it's been out in several newspapers over the past week, but just recently, Mike Dennison from the Associated Press did an article kind of fact-checking the ads that Congressman Daines has put out there. And they basically claim that what Congressman Daines is saying is not true. So we are circulating the article that Mike Dennison put out, and we will also be coming up with ads on TV questioning something like, going back against what Congressman Daines has said. So again, thank you for your question. And but the bottom line is that I'm, very disappointed in Congressman Daines' tactic, that he would, say on one hand that he supports my military career, but on the other side of it, he's being very dishonest with the citizens of Montana. Thank you.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, you need to press 0 to get into the queue to ask Senator Walsh a question this evening. So again, press 0 if you'd like to ask a question tonight. Our next question this evening comes from Billy in Colstrip. Billy, you are live on the line with the Senator, and you can go ahead and ask your question. You are live on the line, Billy. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Thank you. I was wondering your stand on carbon taxes and the way the government is dealing with our power plants, although they conform to pollution standards and are making all efforts to cut pollution.
Well, Billy, appreciate the question. The first thing I want to tell you is that I was born and raised in Butte, Montana. The Berkeley Pit was about 6 blocks from my backyard, and I understand the impact of irresponsible natural resource development. But I also understand the jobs that come along with working for in that natural resource development arena. My father worked for the Anaconda Company, and I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of where I came from, and I'm proud of the work that my father did. But I want to make sure that we have, do everything we possibly can to make sure the environment for, my granddaughter and my children is better than the environment that I had to grow up in. So I strongly support responsible development for all of our natural resources. The Senate is not considering any tax like you mentioned right now, and I cannot support any tax that would harm Montana's jobs and our economy. We've seen, terrible droughts and floods and fires. They are a reality in Montana. And so we need to come up with solutions to reduce those emissions that are helping create the problems. But I'm not going to support anything that is going to have a negative impact on jobs in Montana. Creating more and better paying jobs for the citizens of Montana will always be a priority for me. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much, Senator. As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question this evening, press 0 to get into the live telephone town hall and ask Senator John Walsh a question. Our next question this evening comes from Peter in Essex. Go ahead and ask your question. There you go, Peter. You're live on the line. Go ahead and ask a question.
Yeah, Senator, Pete Sorensen here. What would happen if some of the oil, or a good, healthy majority of it, was diverted from the Keystone pipeline over to Laurel? They've got plenty of acreage to enlarge their plant again, plus it would create all kinds of good jobs. And also, second part of this whole thing is that wondering what your stance is on pro-choice for women.
Appreciate the question. First of all, with regard to the Keystone, is that they are already obtaining lots of oil from Fort McMurray at the refinery in Montana. It's being trucked in via, either by truck or rail. So the oil is coming in, and pipeline coming into to Laurel. So that is already happening. The problem is that the demand for oil, and I brought this question up at a energy conference that was held in Billings, not this past year, but the previous year. There was a lot of discussion. Why don't we just build additional refineries up in the in Montana, for example? And the answer to me was that the demand for oil in that part of the country is not there. So the demand is greater down around in the Gulf area. So I support the Keystone Pipeline because I think it's moving the oil. The oil is going to be moved now. It would be moving it safer and more cost effective. It will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Plus, it will also bring tax revenue into the state of Montana. Over $60 million a year will come to the state from tax revenue by moving that oil through the Keystone Pipeline. With regard to where I stand with a woman's right to choose, let me just talk about where I stand and how I came about this stance. My wife is a diabetic. She's been a diabetic for 43 years. We have 2 wonderful children. Our oldest son is 28. Our youngest son is 24. And when Janet was pregnant with both boys, about 4 to 5 months, 4 months for our oldest son and 5 months for our youngest son, Janet had to be flown to Salt Lake City for our oldest son and Seattle for our youngest son. And the doctors, several weeks before or months before the due date, the doctors came to us and said that we may have to make some difficult decisions because Janet's pregnancy they were both of them very high-risk pregnancies due to her diabetes. And, so Janet and I had to talk about the decisions and talk about, the impacts. And so I'm a pro-choice candidate because I don't believe that, the government should have been involved in making, those decisions. Those decisions should have been made between, Janet and myself and our family and our faith, and not the government. I would hope that, abortions and things like that would never have to happen. But if they do, that a woman has the right to make those decisions without the government being involved. So thank you for that question.
Thank you very much, Senator. As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question tonight, press 0 to get into the queue. Again, if you'd like to ask Senator John Walsh a question this evening, press 0 to get into the queue. Our next question this evening comes from Robert in Essex. Robert, go ahead and ask your question of Senator Walsh.
Yes, Senator. We have a terrible, terrible problem right now on our national borders. I'd like to know your stance on the security aspect of our national borders.
There is a problem with border security, and we need to do everything we can to secure our borders. I believe in stronger borders, and we must always protect this nation, including along the northern border. When I was serving as the Adjutant General of the Montana National Guard, we met with the border protection agencies along the northern border, because of the drugs that were being flown in, over the U.S. Canadian border, and so we worked with military forces to establish radar. The problem is we couldn't provide that capability, 24/7, 365 days a week along the entire northern border. But we know that it's happening, and we've got to stop, drug flow, for example, coming across the northern border, as well as illegal immigrants coming across both the northern and southern border. And so the only way that we're going to do that is to provide additional resources to secure those borders. So I'm an advocate of, before, any type of immigration reform that we do in this country must include stronger border security. Thank you.
Our next question this evening comes from Dan in Kalispell. Dan, go ahead and ask your question of Senator Walsh.
Yeah, hello, Senator Walsh. My question is regarding the VA. My wife currently works at the VA here, and obviously there's been a lot of outrage over wait times and things like that, and I've heard pretty much unanimous, everyone's outraged over it, but very few people are talking about what to do to actually fix it. And I know from hearing about it and things like that, the main problem seems to be a staffing issue. The computer software, they're already entering the data once. New software isn't going to fix that. It's mostly they're short-staffed, not enough doctors and not enough nurses and people doing the staff. And part of the reason for that, it seems pretty unanimous. All the doctors seem to be in agreement that you get more in the private practice. Are you willing to pledge money to help raise the salaries on the doctors there, as well as get some more staff in and actually try and fix the problem, or do you have another plan to go about getting a fix to this issue?
That's a great question. I'm sure you know that I am a veteran. I served for 33 years in the Montana National Guard, commanded an infantry battalion in Iraq for over a year. And so when I came back, I've used the VA hospital. My men that deployed with me have used the VA hospital. I've had excellent care at the VA hospital, but I am very disappointed that of the backlog. What really disappoints me is that our department, the administration, from the president down to Congress to the Secretary of the VA, did not, has not been able to provide the necessary resources to solve this problem. Since September 11, 2003, well, I guess it was 2003 that we started to deploy our forces over to Iraq and Afghanistan. But since that time, we've put over 2 million additional, we have over 2 million veterans now that are eligible to use the VA healthcare system. So we put a significant, demand on our VA healthcare, but we have not provided the resources necessary to deal with that demand. So I do support putting additional resources into the VA, and that's one thing that has really disappointed me with our Congressman Daines, for example, had the opportunity in the bipartisan budget agreement to vote yes and support additional resources going into the VA system, and he voted no. And the reason he voted no is because he said the bipartisan budgeting agreement didn't cut enough out of the budget. So we need to make sure that there is additional resources put into the VA system. I have my staff working out of the once a week, going to the Billings VA clinic and Fort Harrison to help address any of the needs that we have there. I'm also concerned that everybody went after the secretary, right from day one, went after Secretary Shinseki and said that he should be removed. And I waited because I wanted to have the facts before I made a decision on that. But I am concerned that everybody thinks that by replacing the secretary, that's going to solve the problem. So with the VA bill that was just passed last week by the Senate, it will provide additional funding for doctors, nurses, PAs. It will allow our healthcare professionals, our veterans, to see healthcare providers in their local communities. But one thing that I had included into the bill was a commission on care, which will help bring independent, non-partisan oversight to the process to ensure we are addressing these most recent concerns. Part of the responsibility here lies in Congress. I was very disappointed with some members in Congress that didn't back a bill to provide the resources when I first arrived here in February. So we need to provide additional resources to the VA, but I also think that this commission will be able to have an outside look on the VA system and provide tell the new incoming secretary what is exactly wrong with the problem. And, get out there and talk to doctors, get out there and talk with people in the system. So again, thank you for your questions, and thank your wife for her work at the VA and taking care of our veterans.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question tonight of Senator John Walsh, please press 0 to get into the queue. Our next question comes from Benna, I hope I'm saying that correctly, in Columbia Falls. Benna, you are live on the line with Senator Walsh.
Yes, my question has to do with the Second Amendment right. And it's funny how all of the mass shootings, happens either in a school zone or in a mall. And all these zones are a no-gun zone. Now, I understand these criminals do it because the soonest anyone can get there is going to be quite some time because there's no guns allowed there. So it's going to take some time, so therefore they can get as many as they want. So doing all these laws for guns and stuff isn't going to help because they're still going to go to find guns wherever they're going to find them. And then they're still going to go to these no-gun zones to do the most damage because the laws have put it, hey, you can go and do it here because there's not going to be any guns here. So my question is, where do you sit on the Second Amendment right?
Well, first, my thoughts and prayers go out to all the families who have had a child or a neighbor or a friend that has been injured or killed in one of these devastating attacks, whether it's been at a school or a shopping mall or a movie theater, that's I'm very sorry, to the families about that. But I am a very strong supporter of the Second Amendment. But I also believe that with gun ownership comes responsibility, and we are going to have to come together as a nation to address the underlying issue. And what I believe the underlying issue is mental health. Today we are losing over 22 veterans a day to suicide, and the majority of those veterans are dying by using weapons. So I've introduced a bill called the SAVE Act, the Suicide Prevention for America's Veterans Act, to try to help find ways to reduce the mental health issues that our veterans are dealing with. And I think we have to take that not only in our military sector, but in the private sector, the civilian sector as well. We have to be able to put additional mental health care providers out there to identify what these underlying issues are and deal with these underlying issues. But the bottom line and the answer to your question is that I strongly support our Second Amendment rights. I took an oath to defend and support the Constitution of the United States, both as an officer in the United States military and as a United States Senator, and I will continue to support our Second Amendment rights. Thank you.
As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press 0. Our next question this evening comes from Marianne in Kalispell. Marianne, go ahead and ask your question of Senator Walsh.
Hi, Senator Walsh. Thank you so much for participating with the citizens of Montana and listening to us. I work at a family planning clinic, and I got to tell you that every single time there's a political cycle that goes through, we get defunded. The same with WIC and Head Start and many of the social programs that really benefit the working poor in Montana. And if you don't think they're working poor, then you haven't looked beside you. Family planning clinics have been started to promote women's health care for cancer screening, for pregnancy prevention. There would be no abortion if we used responsible pregnancy prevention tactics such as birth control, on and on. But every 2 years now we get our budget cut. We have to work really hard to get that restored. It turns into kind of a philosophical debate versus the amount of money that we actually use that prevents unwanted pregnancies or cancers, STDs, on and on. Where's your stand on keeping our family planning clinics in the state of Montana open so Montana working poor women and men can go in and get the services needed?
Well, Marianne, thank you for that question. I am a strong supporter of family planning clinics, and that we should not be cutting funding towards these clinics, because as you mentioned, there are working poor out there, and we need to do everything we can to help these people and make sure that they have the resources. I know that Washington has a spending problem, and that we need to do everything we can to balance our budget. But I don't believe that we should be doing it on the backs of our most vulnerable citizens, our seniors, our single mothers and fathers, our children, or our veterans. So I strongly support providing proper resources to clinics that help with family planning and women's health. My wife Janet works at an elementary school in Helena, Montana. She's worked there for about 17 years. And we talk about the families, and she sees the children that come into to our school. They're both parents working. Mother and father are working 40-hour-a-week jobs, and the wages they make, they still living under the poverty level. I believe that's wrong. I believe that if a mother and a father are working hard and at 40-hour-a-week jobs, they should be able to make a livable wage, and they should be able to pay the bills, put food on the table, and be able to have quality, affordable health care. So I am going to continue to fight to make sure that we continue to maintain these clinics, and that we increase the minimum wage to lift men and women who are hardworking out of poverty.
Thank you very much, Senator. Our next question this evening comes from Kay in Billings. Go ahead, Kay. You can ask your question of Senator Walsh.
Senator Walsh, Thank you for taking my question, and it isn't really much of a question. It's more so the first thing you have to do is win the election, and I'm wondering why you do not do an ad about Danes wanting to use a voucher for Medicare or privatize it and raising the age of Social Security.
That's a great point. You know, I can tell you that privatizing Medicare is not something that I will ever take a look at. I'm strongly against any efforts to privatize Medicare or Social Security for this generation or the next generation. You know, I want to make sure that that there's talk out there about that the Medicare system will go bankrupt in X number of years, but rather than start cutting the program or privatizing the program, I think we need to find ways to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse in the program. I sit on the aging committee, and one of my first meetings we talked about the fraud that was occurring within the Medicare system. And for example, Miami, Florida was being termed as ground zero for Medicare fraud. Hundreds of millions of dollars a year of people frauding the Medicare system. So we need to eliminate that fraud in the system and do everything we can to shore the program up, because the people that I talk to who are using are on Medicare or use the Medicare system are very pleased with the health care that they are receiving. So you can make sure you can count on me not wanting to privatize that, and I'm going to continue to talk about that throughout my campaign. So thank you for your question.
Our next question comes from John in Billings. John, you can ask your question of Senator Walsh.
Yes, Senator. I'd like to first and foremost thank you for your answer to the previous question on in taking a stand against privatizing Social Security and Medicare. That just tells me you're a man of your word, and you certainly have my vote. My question is in reference to our building our infrastructure, which I thought we should have been doing several decades ago. After the Clinton administration, at the end of the Clinton administration, I believe we had not only a balanced budget, but a surplus. And that all ended when Bush took over. The first thing he did was he spent down our surplus and drug us into 2 wars, which pretty well started the spiral downward financially. But at the end of when we still had a balanced budget and a surplus, I thought that would have been a tremendous opportunity to start building up our infrastructure and highways, bridges. And in particular, my pet project would have been the desalination plants, which should have been built up and down the entire coast of California. I know that the environmentalists over there have a bad problem with that, but recently I noticed too that they are in the process of building a $1 billion desalination plant, which is supposed to be, far more efficient than the previous ones that they've had, and be able to run that. But that's it being a very important part, I believe, of our infrastructure. All the way along the coast of Texas, where they're having drought problems. The Saudis have been using this technology for many years, and they've turned millions of acres of desert into productive farmland. And I just think we should be learning a little bit from them, quit spending all of our money on wars, and start, building up our infrastructure. I think it would help. That in itself would really positively impact our economy if we could do that. What would be your stand on that?
Well, John, I completely agree with you. We have spent over $2 trillion on service contracts alone in the defense budget, mostly for overseas work in the last dozen years. And I've introduced a bill that would save billions of dollars by reducing that kind of spending. I also have a bill that would pay for over 4 years of highway construction, plus drinking water and energy projects across Montana and the country by cutting corporate tax loopholes that allow corporations that, or that would stop corporations that ship jobs overseas. Over 14,000 jobs in Montana depend on highway construction. Infrastructure jobs are great jobs in Montana, and as a member of the Senate Commerce Committee, I'm very committed to having strong infrastructure in this country. So I agree that we need to spend more on infrastructure. Our roads and bridges are crumbling, and we need to continue to invest in them. Plus, with those type of investments, our citizens actually see something from that. So I think Americans, and especially Montanans, would be happy to continue to spend on infrastructure. And one of my priorities is to get this highway funding bill funded as quickly as possible, because right now it's scheduled to run out, by the end of June. We can pay for this without adding to the debt, and by closing tax loopholes on corporations that are sending our businesses overseas and jobs overseas. So thank you for that question.
Next, we're going to take a question from Dorothy in Warden. Dorothy, you are live on the line with the Senator, and you can go ahead and ask your question. Dorothy, we can't really...
I was wondering why my son was in the service and he was in between any wars, but he was down in Alabama, and he was out on a spy mission. But there was 4 of them in the helicopter, and it went down into a tree in a lightning storm, and the lithium battery in the helicopter blew up. And 2 of the boys are already dead, and he has severe lung damage, and he's 50 years old. He's had a pacemaker put in here like 8 years ago, and anyway, he can't get any help from the VA.
Well, Dorothy, that doesn't sound like it should be happening from my perspective. So I will look into this. I will have my staff look into it. I have a young man who works on nothing but veterans issues, and his name is Jonathan. And if you would, let me give you his telephone number. Do you have a pen with you?
Okay.
It's 406-761-1574. And we will, do what we can to look into this and see why your son, is not being looked at by the VA healthcare system, or allowed to go to see a doctor in the private sector. But again, thank you for your son's service, and thank you for sharing your son with the United States military.
Our next question this evening comes from Lola in Great Falls. Lola, you can ask your question of Senator Walsh.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm curious if, just on one comment that you made tonight, and then I'll go into my issue. If you don't want government involved in women's choices, why does government fund abortions? And maybe that was already answered, but I have an issue with that. But I would like to know I consider myself a constitutionalist, and how, if you are elected, how do you view every bill, everything from a constitutional viewpoint, and even if it's contrary to maybe the way the party's going, do they always look at constitutional issues, how it is constitutional first? Because that's how I lean in my decision making. And I don't know if that makes sense, but thank you for taking my call.
No, Lola, it does make sense, and I appreciate the question. First of all, I want to let you know that I represent all Montanans, and I take the oath that I've sworn to this nation, both as a service member after serving 33 years in the military and as a United States Senator, I take these very seriously, and I take each vote in Washington, D.C. with all Montanans in mind. And I look at it as my responsibility to find solutions to these issues that are facing our nation with Montanans in mind. In the military, we were given a mission, and we didn't ask whether the solution was derived by a Republican or a Democrat. It was, is it the right way to solve this problem? So I am very solution-oriented. I want to put the problem out on the table and come together with ideas from both sides of the table and solve the problem. So that's what I will focus on while I'm here in Washington, D.C., because I believe that too many times people vote strictly with the party or vote with the party in power. That's not the type of senator that I'm going to be. One area I think our government and this administration is failing is with regards to looking out for our civil liberties under the Constitution, the First Amendment and the Fourth Amendment, as well as the 14th Amendment. And I think that when I took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States, that meant the entire Constitution. So you can count on me that I will use the Constitution as a guiding document for me while I serve here in the United States Senate. I've introduced bills to stop the NSA and the FBI from collecting bulk data and issuing gag orders. That is not constitutional, and I don't believe it should be happening. We've known about this. It was brought to light over a year ago, and I believe that the President has failed in acting quickly enough or responsibly enough in this area. So I take my oath to the Constitution very seriously, and I always will. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Lola. Our next question this evening comes from Rita in Roundup. Rita, you can go ahead and ask your question of Senator Walsh. Rita, we can't hear you. You are live on the line tonight with Senator Walsh, and you can ask your question.
Are you talking to me?
I think so. Rita?
No, Linda Moore, Roundup, Montana.
Linda, I apologize. We got your name incorrect. You are live on the line, and you can ask Senator Walsh a question.
Senator Walsh, my name is Linda, and I'm from Roundup, Montana, and my question is about small town pharmacies. But I'd like to just make a comment about the underlying problem that somebody was talking about earlier about that. I think it's our values and our morals, that we don't value life because we abort babies by the thousands, and then we wonder why people kill other people. Our values in this country are failing. And also, somebody was talking about Social Security, and I believe that, now this is just my opinion, but I believe that Congress stole that money a long time ago and put it in the general fund. And if they hadn't taken that money out of Social Security and put it in the general fund, there would probably be plenty of money there today. But my question today is about small-town pharmacies, because my small-town pharmacy here in Roundup, I pay a higher copay with TRICARE than I would if I used mail order. But if I use mail order, then the point is that I might not be able to have a small town pharmacy. Do you have a response to that?
I know how challenging providing health care is in rural areas around Montana, and how difficult it can be. And I support proposals that make it easier and less expensive to access prescription drugs and clinics in places like Roundup. So I know it's a difficult issue, but we've got to. I think that if we had the ability to, for example, negotiate prescription drug prices and bring those costs down, that would help us. Continue to support the drugs. The small town rural pharmacies around the state of Montana versus going through the mail order where they're able to buy in bulk or larger quantities. So I think if we were able to, and we're continuing to look at ways to bring down those costs of prescription drugs, but I think, right now we're not able to negotiate prescription drug prices, and we need to take a look at how we can get that done.
Our next question this evening comes from Calvin in Billings. Go ahead with a question for Senator Walsh. Calvin. Calvin, you're on the line.
This is Calvin Pierce calling from Billings, Montana, and I'll make this short and brief. What are your ideas to stop this wild and wasteful spending which we have been doing for years? Our national debt is the most serious thing that's going to destroy the United States. It's not wars, it's not Social Security, it's nothing else. It's the national debt, and I feel that Congress and the Senate and the whole works here has ignored this for years. What are you going to do to stop this wasteful spending?
Well, Calvin, I agree that Washington is broken. Washington has a spending problem, and we need to get our arms around it. I agree that our debt is outrageous, and that's why I've introduced a balanced budget amendment to require Congress to balance a budget or lose their recess time. Since I've been here in March, we've had 3 or 4 one-week recesses where we would go back to the state of Montana. And so, not that while I'm back in Montana, I am traveling around the state talking with constituents, but I don't believe that Congress should be going home if we haven't been able to balance the budget. I've also introduced a bill called the Cuts Act, and what that will do will cut contract spending. Since I don't know if you were on the line when I talked about the Cuts Act, but since 2002, the Department of Defense has spent over $2 trillion on hiring contractors to perform duties that at one time were performed by men and women in uniform. So and we're paying them much more. In some cases, we're paying the CEOs of these contracting companies more than we're paying the President of the United States. So that's just a couple of areas where I believe we can reduce spending. In addition, we have spent these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan have been put on the credit card. Basically, they're not they were not budgeted, and they're very expensive. The president is talking about extending troops into Afghanistan. Right now, we have about 32,000 soldiers in Afghanistan, and the price for one soldier is $1.2 million. That's how much it costs to sustain a soldier in Afghanistan. When we drop that number down below the 10,000 figure, which we're looking at doing, around 9,800 soldiers that they want to extend over there, and they're talking about doing it for 2 to 5 to 10 years at a time, that cost will go from $1.2 million to $2.3 million per soldier. And so if you take $2.3 million times 9,800 soldiers times the number of years that we're going to be over there, that's pretty significant. So we've got to find ways to, so I'm an advocate of bringing our men and women home from Afghanistan. That would reduce that cost right there. And then implementing the bills that I've talked about, that I've introduced already. So thank you for your question, and thank you for your concern, and I think we're in agreement on the national debt. I want to thank everyone for being on this call. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules. I know we're all busy. I appreciate your concerns that we have, because that's very important to me. And thank you for the important work that you do back in Montana. It's always good to hear directly from people back home. Everywhere I go when I'm in Montana, I hear from folks like you asking me to make responsible decisions, to create jobs, protect our freedoms, and to hold Washington accountable, to cut wasteful government spending. And thanks to your input, we're getting it done. And we're doing it responsibly, without hurting the things that are important to Montana, our veterans, our seniors, our kids, as well as we're looking out for the freedoms we can never take for granted. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to give my office a call at 406-657-6790. Or you can also send me an email by going to my website at www.walsh, that's WALSH.senate.gov. Again, thank you all for taking time, and we'll be in touch, and I'll see you on the trail. Take care.